Remember Jet Airways? You might have even flown with them back in the day.
Yeah.
They were a pretty big deal in Indian aviation.
Absolutely huge.
And their attempt to, like, stage a comeback from bankruptcy, well...
It crashed and burned.
It did.
Yeah, and it's a way more complicated story than you might think.
Oh, it is. Way more complicated.
Yeah, this is not just another one of those stories about a company going belly up.
Right.
This one, it really shines a light on how tricky this whole corporate insolvency thing is in India.
Yeah.
And how easily things can go wrong, even when everyone's like, yeah, let's revive this company.
It's true, and that's what we're diving deep into today.
Okay.
It's a recent Supreme Court case that explains exactly why Jet Airways is going back into liquidation.
Oof.
We've got the court documents, analyses, the whole 9 yards.
The whole shebang.
Yeah. And get this. This case, it isn't just about the fate of one airline.
Right.
It reveals a lot about how legal battles go down in the Indian business world and even exposes some, like, potential weaknesses in the system.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to break down exactly why Jet Airways' comeback attempt failed.
Right.
But more importantly, what we can all learn from it for other businesses, you know?
So let's rewind back to 2019.
Okay.
Jet Airways files for bankruptcy.
Yep.
They were a major player, so, I mean, there was a ton of hope that they could pull through.
Oh, for sure. And a resolution plan gets approved, and this company called the Successful Resolution Applicant, or SRA.
And sorry.
Yeah, SRA. They step up to take over.
Okay.
You can kind of think of them as the would-be rescuers, you know?
The White Knights.
Exactly.
And things did look pretty good for a while, right?
They did.
The SRA even managed to get Jet Airways' Air Operator Certificate renewed, the AOC, in May 2022.
Big step.
That's their license to fly, basically.
It is. It's a big deal. Yeah, like that renewal really showed everyone they were serious about getting Jet Airways back in the air. But there's always a but.
There's a but.
There is. The resolution plan had these things called conditions precedent.
Conditions precedent.
Yeah, and these were very specific things the SRA had to do before the deal was, like, totally sealed, you know?
Okay, so, like, the fine print everyone usually ignores.
Pretty much, yep.
So what were these conditions, and, like, where did things start to go south?
Okay, so 3 of these conditions became huge roadblocks.
Okay.
First, the SRA, they needed to get their AOC validated by the authorities.
Not just renewed.
Not just renewed. Yeah, think of it like getting your driver's license officially stamped.
Yeah.
Second, they had to get enough slots at airports.
Slots.
Yeah, like reserving those parking spots for your planes.
I get it.
And lastly, they needed clearance for international traffic rights.
So basically permission to fly overseas.
Exactly. Sounds simple enough, right?
Well, on paper, maybe?
Yeah.
But I'm guessing it wasn't quite that easy.
You're right. It wasn't. The SRA started missing deadlines, and we're not talking like...
Little slip-ups.
No. These were big delays, and it went on for years.
Yeah.
Leading to extensions from the National Company Law Tribunal and the Appellate Tribunal. It was this legal back and forth forever.
So what was the holdup? Was the SRA just incompetent?
Well, it's a little more complicated than that.
Right.
One big sticking point was this performance bank guarantee.
Performance bank guarantee.
Yeah, a PBG, and it was worth a massive Rs 150 crore.
Wow.
It's basically a huge security deposit the SRA had to put down.
To prove they were serious.
Exactly, to show they were serious about the deal.
Makes sense.
Now, the SRA was supposed to pay Rs 350 crore up front, but they argued they could use that PBG towards that amount.
Like, why pay twice, right?
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But the lenders who were owed money, they disagreed.
Ah.
And that's when things got messy. It turned into this massive legal battle.
Oh, man.
Even the Supreme Court stepped in and set a hard deadline of January 31st, 2024 for the SRA to pay the full Rs 150 crore.
In cash.
In cash. And you can probably guess what happened.
They missed it.
They missed it.
So we've got missed deadlines.
Uh-huh.
Big financial disputes.
Yeah.
Doesn't really sound like a recipe for a successful comeback.
No, not really.
Were there other issues too?
Oh, yeah. The court documents show that missing deadlines wasn't the only problem.
Okay.
The SRA also failed to meet some of those conditions precedent we talked about.
Uh-huh.
The AOC lapsed. The airport slots, they weren't really secured.
And the international flight clearances?
Nowhere in sight.
So it's like they were trying to build a house without the land, the permits, or even enough bricks.
That's a great way to put it. And to top it all off, they didn't pay their employees what they were owed.
Like provident fund, gratuity.
Yeah, all of that, which was another requirement in the plan.
Not a good look.
Not at all.
No.
It really makes you wonder if they were actually committed to reviving the airline or just trying to get a sweet deal.
Right, so things are looking pretty bad for Jet Airways at this point.
Yeah,
But you mentioned earlier that this case has bigger implications, right?
it does.
Like beyond just one airline going under.
It does. The Supreme Court actually said a lot about the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code,
The IBC.
the IBC, based on all of this.
So what did they say? Did they basically say the IBC is a failure?
No, not quite. But they did point out some serious flaws in the law.
Like what?
Well, they said the IBC is super focused on getting that resolution plan approved, but it doesn't do enough to make sure the plan actually gets implemented properly.
Like you could have a perfect plan on paper.
Exactly.
If there's no way to enforce it.
Then what's the point?
Right.
What's the point?
Yeah, that's a huge problem, and the court didn't hold back. They called out those flaws, and they even criticized both the SRA and the lenders.
Really?
Yeah, they basically said they both could have handled things better.
Sounds like you're saying everyone involved needs to step up their game.
Absolutely, and they had some specific suggestions on how to strengthen the IBC.
Oh, like what?
Things like, stricter penalties for anyone who doesn't follow through on their commitments, giving the resolution professional more power to enforce the plan.
Okay. And even setting up monitoring committees to oversee the whole process.
So it's like they used this Jet Airways case as a way to improve the whole system.
Exactly. And we're going to get into those suggestions in a lot more detail.
Okay.
Because they have big implications for businesses in all sorts of industries.
Yep.
All right. So let's dig into those suggestions the Supreme Court made, for improving the IBC.
Okay.
Remember, they basically used this whole Jet Airways situation to show where the IBC might be falling short.
Yeah, like they took a magnifying glass to the whole thing and said, hey, we got to fix these cracks if we want this law to actually work.
That's a great way to put it. And one of the most interesting suggestions was about making the penalties way stricter.
Okay.
For anyone who, deliberately violates the terms of a resolution plan.
So basically holding people accountable.
Yeah, making them actually face consequences for not keeping their promises.
Seems pretty straightforward.
You'd think so, right? But here's the thing. Right now, the penalty for violating a resolution plan, even one that involves crores of rupees, it's just 1 lakh rupees.
Seriously?
Seriously, imagine getting a parking ticket for, totaling a Ferrari.
It's practically nothing.
It's nothing. It's basically an open invitation to cut corners.
You're right. It's definitely not going to scare off the big players.
Nope. So the court said, hey, let's change the law to make the penalty actually match the amount of money involved in the plan.
So if you're dealing with crores, the penalty should be in crores too.
Exactly. That'll make people think twice before they try to mug around.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Right.
It actually shows they're serious about making this IBC thing work.
For sure. And speaking of making it work, let's talk about the resolution professional for a second.
Okay.
The RP.
Yeah, you mentioned them earlier, right?
Yeah, they're a key player in this whole insolvency process.
Like, what do they do?
Well, they're like the captain of the ship. They manage the company during this whole crazy time. They gather all the claims, they figure out the financials, and they help put that resolution plan together.
Right. But their job's basically done once that plan is approved, isn't it?
That's the problem the court pointed out.
Oh.
Right now, the RP, they don't really have any power to make sure the plan is actually followed.
It's like giving someone the blueprints for a house, but not giving them any tools to build it.
Exactly.
So what's the solution? Give the RP more power.
Yep. The court suggested that the RP should be able to take legal action against anyone who breaks the rules of the plan.
So they're not just a figurehead anymore.
Yep.
They can actually do something.
They can enforce the rules, make sure the plan actually happens.
I like it. Any other big suggestions for making sure the IBC actually works?
There is one more. The court proposed these things called mandatory monitoring committees.
Mandatory monitoring committees.
Yeah, basically a dedicated team that keeps an eye on how the plan is being implemented.
Like an auditor for the whole process.
Exactly. Now, right now, it's up to the NCLT whether to have these committees.
Okay. But the court said that can lead to problems.
So sometimes there's oversight, sometimes there isn't.
Yeah, not exactly reliable. Right.
Not really.
Having a mandatory monitoring committee, though, that brings structure, and an accountability to the whole thing. They'd be in charge of making sure the company is handed over to the new owner smoothly.
Right.
That everything's on track, and they'd flag any issues right away.
That's a really important check and balance, right?
It is. Make sure everything stays on course.
Now, we talked about the resolution plan itself, but the court also had some things to say about the NCLTs.
Oh, yeah.
The National Company Law Tribunals. Remember, what was that all about?
Well, we talked about those delays.
Yeah, and the lack of expertise.
Uh-huh. The court actually went a step further and criticized them for sometimes ignoring Supreme Court orders.
Whoa, seriously.
Yeah, and for not being very efficient.
Are they basically saying the NCLTs are a mess?
Not exactly, but they're definitely highlighting some serious issues that need fixing.
The court basically said that the NCLTs, they're crucial for the IBC to work.
Makes sense.
They need to be efficient, transparent, and operate with, like, the highest level of integrity.
Right, because if the people overseeing the process are flawed,
Yeah,
the whole system falls apart.
exactly. So the court gave some suggestions for how to improve the NCLTs.
Okay, like what?
First, fill those vacancies quickly and make sure the people they appoint actually have the right experience.
Okay.
Second, create a system to fast-track urgent cases.
Makes sense.
And finally, they really pushed for improving the quality of decision-making within these tribunals.
So more professional, more streamlined.
Exactly. More expertise, more efficiency, more accountability.
I like it.
And those themes, efficiency, expertise, accountability, they're all over this judgment.
Really?
Yeah, it's clear the court sees those things as essential for the IBC to be successful.
Okay, so the court didn't hold back on pointing out the problems, but did they have anything to say about the Committee of Creditors?
The COF.
Yeah, they play a big role in this whole thing, right?
They do. They're the group of lenders who ultimately decide whether to approve the resolution plan.
Right.
And they use what's called commercial wisdom to make that decision.
Commercial wisdom.
Yeah, what do you think that means?
I guess it means they can decide what's best for the company financially, even if it's not exactly what the original plan said.
You got it. It's like their expert judgment call.
Okay, so they're not just rubber stamping everything.
Nope. They have real power.
So what'd the court say about them?
Well, they said that the COCON's decisions are pretty much untouchable.
Untouchable.
By the courts, I mean.
Okay.
But they did emphasize that the COCON needs to be more transparent.
So they can't just say yes or no without explaining why.
Exactly. They got to give clear reasons for their decisions, and that makes the whole process more transparent and accountable.
Makes sense. Anything else about the COCON?
One more thing, the court suggested looking into ways to better enforce these guidelines for the COCON.
How would they do that?
Maybe through an independent oversight committee or something.
Wow, that's a pretty big deal, like a whole new layer of checks and balances.
It is a big change, but it shows that the court understands that even though the COTC is super important,
Yeah.
there's always room for improvement.
Okay, so we've covered a lot.
We have.
This Jet Airways case, it's really highlighted some weaknesses in the IBC.
For sure.
And the court has given some pretty bold ideas for fixing them.
They have.
But how does all this actually affect businesses and the people involved in these situations?
That's a great question. We need to break that down carefully.
Okay.
Let's do a quick recap of what we've learned so far,
All right.
and then we can dive into what it all means practically.
All right, so let's take a minute to recap this whole roller coaster ride.
Yeah, good idea.
We started this deep dive with what seemed like a pretty hopeful comeback story for Jet Airways.
Right.
Resolution plan, new owner, the SRA, ready to go.
Uh-huh.
They even got that air operator certificate renewed.
Yeah, things were looking up.
It did seem like it was all falling into place, right?
It did.
But as we dug a little deeper,
Yeah.
we found those conditions precedent. Those things the SRA absolutely had to do.
Those were key.
They were, but then
The deadlines, they just
started slipping.
started slipping, yeah. And then all those disputes popped up.
Especially that one about the performance bank guarantee.
Huge.
Yeah, and in the end, they just didn't meet those conditions.
Nope.
It's
Like watching a train wreck in slow motion.
it is. You know it's coming,
Yeah.
but you can't do anything to stop it.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just about money either, right?
Yeah.
The SRA didn't secure those airport slots
Mm-hmm.
or get the clearances for international flights, and they didn't even pay their employees.
Wow.
It makes you wonder if they were ever really committed to reviving the airline at all.
Yeah, you really have to question their motives at that point.
It's a good reminder that these resolution plans, they're not just about legalities and money.
Right.
It's about people's lives, their jobs.
Yeah.
And once that trust is broken,
It's hard to rebuild.
yeah. But like we've been talking about,
Yeah.
this whole case, it also showed us some problems with the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code.
Some weaknesses, for sure.
The Supreme Court basically said, look, we got to make sure these plans aren't just words on paper.
They got to actually be implemented.
Exactly.
They need teeth.
They need teeth.
Yeah, like remember those suggestions about stricter penalties?
Uh-huh.
Imagine if messing up could cost you crores, not just a lakh.
That would definitely get people's attention.
Right. Make them think twice.
It would. And it's not just about punishing people either.
No.
It's about giving the right people the power to make sure these plans actually happen.
Exactly.
Like giving the resolution professional more authority.
Huge.
Yeah, they can actually hold people accountable.
Yeah, and those mandatory monitoring committees.
It's like having an independent watchdog.
Keeping an eye on everything.
Making sure everything's transparent. And the court, they didn't hold back on the NCLTs either, remember?
Oh, yeah.
They basically said, you guys need to step it up.
Get your act together.
More expertise, more efficiency, more accountability.
Could have said it better myself.
It's like they're pushing for a total overhaul.
It is a pretty big deal.
And what about the COSI?
Yeah.
What do they say about them?
Well, the court recognized their commercial wisdom.
Right, that ability to make those tough calls.
Exactly. But they also said they need to be more transparent.
Explain their reasoning.
Right. No more just saying yes or no.
Makes sense.
Transparency and accountability, gotta have both.
It's about balance, isn't it?
It is. It's like,
Giving the COSI the freedom to make decisions, but also holding them responsible for those decisions.
Perfect analogy.
Like a captain steering the ship. But they need a good map and a reliable compass.
I like it.
This whole deep dive has shown us that the IBC, it's a powerful tool.
It is.
But it's not perfect.
No, it needs work.
It needs everyone to act in good faith.
Absolutely.
And it needs a strong system to back it up.
If we want it to really work.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners?
Especially those in the business world.
Yeah. What should they be thinking about?
Well, the Jet Airways liquidation, it's a cautionary tale.
It is.
It reminds us that those legal agreements, even in bankruptcy situations, they gotta be honored.
People need to keep their promises.
Exactly. And time is of the essence. You gotta move quickly.
And it's not just about the money.
It's about making a genuine effort to save the company.
Right. To give it a second chance.
Exactly. And everyone involved, the professionals, the creditors, the tribunals, they all have a responsibility to make sure the IBC actually works.
It's a team effort.
It is.
And for anyone listening who might be going through something similar,
yeah,
this case is a wake-up call, right?
It is.
Be proactive, be honest, and get expert advice.
Because even small mistakes can have big consequences down the line.
They can.
This isn't just a legal process.
It's about people's livelihoods.
Exactly. And we need to give companies a real shot at a fresh start.
We do.
And that means making sure the system works the way it's supposed to.
Powerful message.
It is.
Leaves us with a lot to think about.
Definitely.
What other industries might face these kinds of challenges in the future?
Right.
And how can we use what we've learned from Jet Airways to make sure those resolutions are successful?
So companies and the people they support can get a fresh start.
Something to ponder, for sure.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.